The shovel bit into the hard Arizona earth with a sound like breaking bones. Ethan Cross stood beneath the cottonwood tree, his hands raw and bleeding from 6 hours of digging. The two graves before him were small, too small for the weight they would carry in his heart forever. Mary lay in the larger one, her body wrapped in the quilt her mother had made for their wedding. Little Emma, only 6 years old, rested in the smaller grave, clutching the wooden doll Ethan had carved for her last birthday. It was March 1871, and the fever had taken them while he was 3 days out on a scouting mission for Fort Huachuca. The neighbors had found them when the smoke stopped rising from the chimney. By the time Ethan returned, racing his horse until it nearly died beneath him, they were already cold. Mary's face, once bright with laughter, had turned the color of old parchment. Emma's tiny hands, which had drawn butterflies and horses with such joy, were stiff and still. "I should have been here," he whispered to the graves, his voice breaking on each word. "A man protects his family. A man stays close. I failed you both." The preacher from Copper Creek had offered to say words, but Ethan had refused. What words could capture Mary's laugh when she'd first seen him, muddy and bleeding, dragged into her medical tent at Antietam? What prayers could hold Emma's delight when she'd catch fireflies in the summer evenings, insisting they were fairy lights? He said his own words instead, promises to the dead that he would never again fail to protect the innocent, never again choose duty over love. 6 years had passed since that day, and the promises had calcified into a shell around his heart. The cottonwood had grown taller, its roots deep in soil enriched by grief. Ethan had grown older, harder, like leather left too long in the sun. At 41, he moved through life with the mechanical precision of a man who had learned that caring too much was a luxury he could no longer afford. September 18 found him making his monthly trip to Copper Creek for supplies. The town had grown in 6 years, fed by silver strikes in the nearby mountains and the endless appetite of the frontier for places where law was negotiable and morality was optional. 2,000 souls now called Copper Creek home, though souls was perhaps too generous a term for many of them. The main street stretched for a quarter-mile, lined with establishments that catered to every human vice and necessity. The Gilded Lady Saloon anchored the north end, where piano music and gunshots provided the evening entertainment. The south end held McKenna's General Store, Hartley's Livery, and the office of Sheriff Brennan, who spent more time counting bribes than keeping peace. Ethan had a list, carefully written in pencil on brown paper. 50 pounds of flour, 20 pounds of salt, 10 pounds of coffee, 200 rounds for his Winchester, 100 for his Colt, new horseshoes, lamp oil, and perhaps a bottle of whiskey to make the night shorter. He'd budgeted $40 for everything, leaving him enough to last until the small harvest from his vegetable garden came in. The morning sun cast long shadows as he drove his buckboard wagon down Main Street. Something felt wrong immediately. The usual morning crowd, a mix of miners heading to work and merchants opening shops, had gathered in the town square near the general store. Their energy was different from the typical laziness of a Tuesday morning. It reminded him of the crowds that had gathered for hangings during the war, that particular mix of excitement and cruelty that marked humanity at its worst. Then he heard the voice that would change everything. Jake Morrison stood on a hastily constructed wooden platform, 8 feet square and 2 feet high, positioned where everyone passing through the square would have to see it. At 45, Morrison had the look of a man who had learned to profit from others' misery and had developed a taste for it. His silk vest, imported from San Francisco at considerable expense, caught the morning light. His boots, polished to a military shine, had never seen honest work. His face carried the florid complexion of a man who drank expensive brandy and ate rich food while others starved. Morrison's history was written in scars across the territory. He'd started as a private in the Confederate Army, deserted after Gettysburg, and reinvented himself as a trader in human misery. Slavery might have been illegal since 1865, but men like Morrison had found ways around the law. Debt bondage, prison labor contracts, and the buying and selling of custody rights over Native Americans had made him wealthy. The sheriff, who received a monthly envelope from Morrison, somehow never found evidence of actual slavery. "Gentlemen, gather round," Morrison's voice boomed across the square with the practiced projection of a carnival barker. "Today I offer you an opportunity that comes along once in a lifetime. Two Apache sisters, young and strong, perfect for any labor you might require. The crowd pressed closer, maybe 60 men now, their faces showing that particular ugliness that comes when humans stop seeing other humans as equals. Ethan recognized many of them. Tom Hutchins, who owned the Double Bar Ranch and was known for working his hands until they collapsed. Sam McKenna, who ran the saloon and had buried two wives already, both dying under mysterious circumstances. Carl Johnson, a miner who spent his silver on whiskey and women, usually against their will. Will Davis, nicknamed Rattlesnake, for his speed with a gun and his willingness to use it. Henry Thompson, a merchant who dealt in goods better not examined too closely. On the platform, two Apache women stood with their wrists bound loosely with hemp rope. The rope was loose enough to seem humane to casual observers, but tight enough to leave angry red marks on their skin. The older one stood with her chin raised, meeting the crowd's stares with a defiance that seemed to personally offend Morrison. This was Maya, 25 years old, though the hardship of the last days had aged her face. Her long black hair, which would normally be carefully braided and adorned with beads and feathers marking her status, hung loose and tangled. Several feathers remained, torn and bent, clinging to strands like memories of dignity. Her doe-skin dress, which would have taken months to make and decorate, bore the damage of rough handling. The neckline had been torn, probably from someone grabbing her, and she kept trying to hold it closed with her bound hands. The beadwork, intricate patterns that told stories of her family and achievements, had been partially ripped away. Dark stains on the leather might have been blood or dirt or both. Her feet were bare, her moccasins likely stolen or lost, and cuts on her soles suggested she'd been forced to walk over rough ground. Beside her, pressed so close their shoulders touched, stood Sarah. At 19, she should have been preparing for marriage, learning the final secrets of womanhood from the elder women of her tribe. Instead, she trembled like a leaf in a storm, her whole body shaking in waves that came and went with her breathing. Her dress was in worse condition than Maya's, torn at the hem so badly that her legs were exposed to the knee. The side seams had been stretched and torn, probably from rough handling, and she kept her arms crossed over her chest, trying to cover the gaps in the fabric. Sarah's face showed signs of violence. Her lower lip was split and swollen. A bruise darkened her left cheekbone. Her eyes, which should have been bright with youth, darted constantly between the faces in the crowd, like a rabbit searching for wolves. She never looked at any man for more than a second before moving on, never finding safety, never finding hope. Now let me tell you about these fine specimens, Morrison continued, warming to his pitch. He grabbed Maya's arm and lifted it, displaying her to the crowd like a horse at auction. Maya jerked away, and several men laughed. The older one here is prime breeding age. Look at those hips, gentlemen, built for work and for whelping. She's got fight in her too, as you can see. Some of you might enjoy breaking that spirit, if you know what I mean. He winked grotesquely at the crowd, and more laughter rippled through the square. She can cook, clean, work the fields, and warm your beds on cold nights. Her name's Maya, though you can call her whatever you want once you own her. I've had her for 3 days now, and she's stayed healthy and strong. Haven't touched her myself, if that matters to any of you. I'm a businessman, not a savage. The lie was obvious to anyone who looked at the bruises on Maya's arms, the way she flinched when Morrison came close. But the crowd didn't care about truth. They were here for the spectacle and the opportunity. Now the younger one, Morrison continued, moving to Sarah, who shrank back until Maya stepped partially in front of her. This one's special, gentlemen. Sweet 19, pretty as a desert flower, and here's the best part. She's deaf and mute. Can't hear a thing, can't say a word. Think about that. No backtalk, no screaming, no complaints. She'll do whatever you want, and the neighbors won't hear a thing. The implications hung in the air like smoke from a garbage fire. Several men stepped closer to the platform, their interest clearly piqued. Ethan felt his hands clench into fists, his nails digging into his palms hard enough to draw blood. Then Morrison delivered the line that would echo through the rest of their lives. And here's the deal of the century, boys. Today only, it's buy one, get one free. You heard that right? Purchase the older sister for $300, and I'll throw in the young one at no extra charge. 2 Apache women for the price of 1. It's like Christmas came early. The crowd erupted in excitement and discussion. Men were calculating their funds, discussing partnerships to split the cost, making jokes about sharing arrangements that turned Ethan's stomach. But he had stopped listening to them. His attention was fixed on Maya, who had turned slightly, and in turning had revealed something that changed everything. Her sleeve had pulled back when she'd moved to protect Sarah, exposing her upper arm. There, carved into her skin with ceremonial precision, was a scar in the distinctive shape of an eagle's head. Not just any eagle, but the specific design used by Chief White Eagle of the Chiricahua Apache. Ethan knew that mark. More than that, he knew only White Eagle's children had the right to wear it, carved in a ceremony when they came of age. The memory hit him with physical force. 15 years ago, 1862, he'd been a young cavalry scout, tracking a mountain cat that had been taking livestock from Fort Buchanan. He'd followed it too far into Apache territory, confident in his skills, arrogant in his youth. The cat had led him straight to a grizzly bear's den. The bear, a massive male defending cubs that weren't even visible, had attacked with the fury of a force of nature. Its first swipe had opened his chest from shoulder to hip, claws like cavalry sabers tearing through flesh and muscle. The second blow had broken 3 ribs in his left arm. He'd managed one shot from his rifle before the bear had knocked it away, and then he was on his back, watching death descend in the form of 800 pounds of fury. The Apache war party had heard his screams. They could have let him die, should have probably, given what the cavalry had done to their people. But White Eagle had personally put 3 arrows into the bear's chest, and when that hadn't stopped it, had finished it with a lance through the eye. For 3 months, Ethan had lived with White Eagle's band while recovering. The chief's wife, Singing Bird, had sewn his wounds with sinew, packed them with herbs that prevented infection. White Eagle himself had sat with Ethan through the fever dreams, forcing water and medicine down his throat. They taught him to walk again when the wounds had healed enough, taught him their language, their customs, their way of seeing the world not as something to be conquered, but as something to be part of. Maya had been 10 years old then, a bright-eyed girl who'd brought him food and water, who'd laughed when he'd mangled Apache words, who'd shown him how to read tracks the Apache way. She'd called him Ghost Walker because he'd learned to move quietly despite his size. Her younger brother, only 4, had been fascinated by Ethan's blue eyes, calling them sky stones. When Ethan had finally healed enough to leave, White Eagle had taken him to the edge of their territory. "You have a good heart, Ghost Walker," the chief had said in careful English, "but you serve men who do not. One day you will have to choose between your people and what is right. When that day comes, remember that my family saved your life not because of what tribe you belong to, but because saving life is what makes us human." Now, 15 years later, White Eagle's daughter stood on a platform being sold like livestock, and Ethan knew exactly what choice he had to make. 300, Tom Hutchins called out, his voice cutting through the crowd noise. "For both of them, as you said, buy one, get one free." Morrison beamed. 300 from Mr. Hutchins. Do I hear 350? 350, Sam McKenna countered, already calculating how much money he could make forcing the women to work in his saloon's back rooms. 400, Carl Johnson shouted, drunk despite the early hour. Ethan pushed through the crowd, his movement deliberate and unhurried. Men stepped aside reflexively, something in his bearing suggesting it would be unwise to impede him. He'd learned long ago that violence lived in the body before it reached the hands, and his body was speaking a language every man there understood. 500, Will Davis said with a lazy drawl. "And Morrison, I want guarantees they're both healthy. I got work needs doing." "Healthy as horses, Mr. Davis," Morrison assured him. "You can inspect them yourself if you'd like." Davis started toward the platform, and Ethan saw Maya's jaw tighten, saw Sarah press even closer to her sister. That's when Ethan spoke. $1,000. The words cut through the square like a rifle shot. Every head turned to stare at him. Morrison's theatrical smile froze, then slowly widened into something more genuine and far uglier. Well, 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 Ethan Cross, the hermit of Ghost Valley. Didn't know you were in the market for female companionship." Morrison's tone dripped with false friendliness. $1,000, you say? Ethan reached into his coat and pulled out a leather pouch, heavy with gold coins. It was everything he had, the payment from selling his southern pasture to a mining company 3 months ago. He'd planned to use it to last through the winter, maybe buy a new roof for the barn. None of that mattered now. $1,000, he repeated, but not for your deal, Morrison. I'm paying $500 for each woman. They're human beings, not cattle to be bundled for sale. The square went silent, except for a dog barking somewhere in the distance and the creak of a sign swinging in the morning breeze. Morrison's face flushed red, then purple, the veins in his neck standing out like ropes. Now hold on, Cross. The deal is buy one, get one free. That's what I'm offering. You can't just, I can and I am. Ethan stepped onto the platform, and Morrison instinctively stepped back. Up close, the merchant smelled of bay rum cologne and cruelty. Unless you're saying the younger one has no value. Because if she has no value, then she can't be property. And if she's not property, then keeping her is kidnapping. I'm sure even Sheriff Brennan would have to act on a kidnapping charge, especially with 60 witnesses. Morrison's hand twitched toward the Remington revolver at his hip. Ethan didn't move, but something in his stillness made Morrison's hand stop. Too many witnesses, too much money at stake, and something else. Something Morrison saw in Ethan's eyes that made him remember the man had been a soldier, a scout, a killer when necessary. You're making a mistake, Cross, Morrison said, his voice low and tight. These aren't women, they're Apache, savages. They'll slit your throat the moment you turn your back. Then that's my problem, not yours. Ethan held out the pouch. $1,000. Count it if you want, but it's all there. Morrison snatched the pouch, his fingers quickly feeling the weight and hearing the distinctive clink of gold coins. His merchant's instincts overrode his anger. $1,000 was more than he'd make in 3 normal sales. Fine, he spat, but I want this legal and proper. Sheriff Brennan, get over here and witness this. Sheriff Brennan, a thin man with the permanent stoop of someone who'd spent his life bowing to whoever paid him, hurried over with a leather ledger. He wrote out a bill of sale, his hand shaking slightly as he felt the tension on the platform. Sign here, Mr. Cross, he said, offering a pen. Ethan signed his name in firm strokes. Then before anyone could stop him, he took the pen and added a line to the document. This payment represents the transfer of guardianship, not ownership, as no human being can own another under the Constitution of these United States as amended. That's not legal language, Morrison protested. It is now, Ethan said, unless you want to take it to a federal judge and explain what you're really doing here. Morrison's face went through several more color changes before he finally nodded to one of his men. Cut them loose. A rough-looking man with tobacco-stained teeth climbed onto the platform and cut the ropes binding Maya and Sarah's wrists. Both women rubbed their wrists, the angry red marks showing how tight the bonds had been despite their apparent looseness. Maya looked at Ethan with deep suspicion, searching his face for the trap, the deception, the moment when his true intentions would be revealed. Sarah pressed against her sister, making rapid hand movements that Ethan recognized as sign language, though not the military version he'd learned. You're coming with me, Ethan said quietly, pitched for their ears only. No one's going to hurt you again. Why? Maya asked in accented but clear English. Why would you pay so much for us? Because your father once saved my life, Ethan replied in Apache, watching Maya's eyes widen in shock. White Eagle spent 3 months healing a stupid white man who'd walked into a bear's den. I've carried that debt for 15 years. Maya's composure cracked slightly, surprise and something like hope flickering across her features. You are Ghostwalker? The quiet white man who learned our ways? I am. And you're Maya, who brought me soup and laughed when I said thank you wrong for 2 weeks straight. Before Maya could respond, Morrison called out loud enough for everyone to hear. Congratulations, Cross. You just bought yourself 2 Apache wives for $1,000. Hope you enjoy them both. Buy one, get one free, and you were greedy enough to pay for both. What a fool. The crowd laughed, but it was nervous laughter now. Something about the transaction had shifted the mood. The festival atmosphere of human degradation had been punctured by Ethan's refusal to play along with the fiction that this was normal commerce. Ethan led Maya and Sarah down from the platform, keeping his body between them and the crowd. Men still made comments, crude suggestions about what he planned to do with 2 young savages, but fewer joined in. Some looked ashamed, though not enough to have stopped the sale if Ethan hadn't intervened. His wagon stood at the edge of the square, loaded with the supplies he'd bought before witnessing the auction. 50-pound sacks of flour and cornmeal, tools, a new axe handle, coils of rope. He quickly rearranged them to make space for passengers, creating a small area where the women could sit with some comfort. "Can you climb up?" he asked Maya in Apache. She nodded, then helped Sarah up first. As Sarah settled onto the wagon bed, she made a series of quick hand gestures to Maya. The movements were complex, far more sophisticated than the military sign language Ethan knew. This was something older, more complete, a full language of motion and meaning. Maya responded with her own signs, then looked at Ethan with surprise. "She asks if you are the man who walks with ghosts. She says you have stones in your chest where your heart should be, but the stones are crying." Ethan felt something twist inside him. "Your sister is very perceptive." "Oh, she sees much because she cannot speak," Maya said. "She has been silent for 4 years since the day Morrison killed our father." "She's not deaf, though." It wasn't a question. Ethan had noticed how Sarah's eyes tracked sound, how she'd flinched at loud noises from the crowd. Maya studied him for a moment before answering. "No, but Morrison believed she was worthless because she wouldn't speak. That's why he offered her as the free gift with me. He thought he was giving away something broken. He was wrong." "About many things," Maya agreed. Ethan clicked his tongue and his horses began moving, pulling the wagon away from the square. As they passed the general store, he stopped briefly. "Wait here," he told Maya. "I need to get a few more things." Inside, he quickly purchased 3 wool blankets, a canvas tarp, dried beef, canned peaches, and 2 sets of simple clothing that might fit the women better than their torn traditional dress. The store owner, Marcus Hartley, looked uncomfortable as he tallied the purchase. "Ethan, you know what you're doing is going to cause trouble," Marcus said quietly. "Morrison doesn't forgive public humiliation." "Then Morrison should choose his battles more carefully. I'm just saying, watch your back. And here." Marcus added 2 boxes of ammunition to Ethan's purchase without charging for them. "You might need these." Outside, Ethan found a small crowd had gathered around his wagon. 3 of Morrison's men stood too close, making comments about checking the merchandise. Maya had positioned herself between them and Sarah, her body coiled like a spring, despite having no weapon. "Step back," Ethan said quietly. "Just being friendly, Cross," one of them said. "Wanted to congratulate you on your purchase. 2 for the price of 2, what a bargain." "I said step back." Something in Ethan's tone made them comply, though they continued making crude gestures as the wagon rolled away. At the town's edge, near the last building before the desert took over, Morrison himself stood waiting. "This isn't over, Cross," he said loud enough for the women to hear. "Those savages know something I need. The older one's father stole from me before I killed him. Hid something valuable. I'll be coming for what's mine. You come to my land, Morrison, and I'll bury you on it." Morrison smiled, the expression all teeth and no warmth. "We'll see about that. Enjoy your new squaws, Cross, however long you have them." The trail to Ethan's ranch led northwest through 20 miles of desert before reaching the foothills of the Dragoon Mountains. It was a journey that normally took him 4 hours, but with passengers and the certainty of being followed, he'd need to be more careful. 2 miles out of town, he pulled the wagon to a stop near a small grove of mesquite trees. A spring-fed pool, no bigger than a dining table, provided water for travelers who knew where to look. He discovered it years ago, following deer tracks. "We'll water the horses here," he said, climbing down, "and you 2 should drink and eat something." He helped Sarah down first, noticing how she moved stiffly, probably from being forced to stand for hours during Morrison's attempt to sell them. Maya climbed down on her own, but he saw her wince when her bare feet touched the ground. The cuts on her soles were worse than he'd thought. From his supplies, he pulled out the dried beef, some hard biscuits, and the canned peaches. He opened the peaches with his knife, offering them to Sarah first. Her eyes widened at the sweetness, and she made a small sound of pleasure, the first vocalization he'd heard from her. "When did you last eat?" he asked Maya. 2 days ago. Morrison gave us water but little food. He said hungry slaves are obedient slaves." Ethan felt that cold thing in his chest grow colder. He divided the food equally into 3 portions, then took his own portion and added it to theirs. I ate this morning, he lied. Maya watched him carefully as she ate, her movements controlled despite her hunger. Between bites, she asked, "Your ranch, how far?" "Another 18 miles, but we'll go through the Devil's Canyon. It's shorter and harder to ambush if Morrison's men follow." "They will follow. Morrison believes my father hid gold before he died." "Did he?" Maya was quiet for a moment, then said, "Not gold, something more valuable. Knowledge. My father was keeper of the 7 sacred scrolls. They contain centuries of Apache wisdom. Medical treatments, maps to water in the desert, astronomical calculations for predicting weather, methods for preserving food, working metal. Morrison would sell them to collectors or museums, turn our heritage into money. And you know where they are?" "Sarah knows. My father told her alone, thinking a girl who couldn't speak couldn't betray the secret. He didn't know she'd stop speaking by choice." Ethan looked at Sarah, who was signing something complex to Maya. Maya translated, "She says the stones in your chest are getting lighter. She says maybe you're the one our father told us about, the white man who would come when we needed help most. I'm just a man trying to pay a debt. Maybe, or maybe debts and destiny are the same thing sometimes." They remounted the wagon and continued on. Ethan took a longer route that would minimize their tracks, using rocky ground when possible. Every few minutes, he checked their back trail, looking for dust clouds that would signal pursuit. As they traveled, Maya asked about his ranch, and he found himself talking more than he had in years. He described the valley, hidden between 2 ridges, with good water from a spring that never ran dry. 40 acres of decent grazing land, a small orchard he'd planted 5 years ago just starting to bear fruit, a solid cabin he'd built with his own hands from local timber. "You live alone?" Maya asked. "For 6 years now." "By choice?" "By circumstance. My wife and daughter died while I was away working. After that, alone seemed safer." "Safer for who?" It was a question he couldn't answer. The entrance to Devil's Canyon appeared as a dark slash in the red rock face, barely wide enough for 2 wagons to pass. The canyon walls rose 200 feet on either side, carved by centuries of flash floods into smooth, twisted sculptures. It had earned its name from the howling sound wind made passing through the narrow sections, and from the 3 documented ambushes that had left 17 men dead over the past decade. Ethan had traveled it many times, knew every twist and potential hiding spot, but today felt different. The horses were nervous, their ears flat against their heads, nostrils flaring at some scent he couldn't detect. "Something's wrong," Maya said quietly. Sarah was signing frantically, her movements sharp with fear. Maya translated, "She feels vibrations in the wood. Horses ahead, waiting." Ethan had already reached the same conclusion. His hand found the Winchester rifle hidden under the grain sacks, checking that a round was chambered. His Colt 45 sat loose in its holster. "When I tell you," he said quietly to Maya, "you and Sarah lie flat in the wagon bed. No matter what happens, stay down." They'd made it halfway through the canyon when the ambush came. "That's far enough, Cross." 3 men emerged from behind the rocks ahead. Will "Rattlesnake" Davis led them, his reputation as a fast gun earning him top dollar as a bounty hunter and hired killer. The 2 men with him were strangers, but they had the look of professionals, their weapons held with casual competence. "Davis," Ethan acknowledged, keeping his hands visible but ready. "Morrison paying you his usual rate, or did he promise you a bonus for the women?" Davis grinned, showing teeth stained brown from years of chewing tobacco. "500 for both girls, delivered breathing, 300 if they're not. Nothing about you either way, so I figure that gives me options." "You always were a practical man." "Practical enough to know you're outnumbered 3-to-1 with 2 women to protect. That's bad odds, even for someone with your reputation." "What reputation would that be?" "Come now, Cross, you think people forgot? The Ghost Walker, the Angel of Death at Antietam. 67 confirmed kills with a Sharps rifle. I did my research after Morrison put out the word." Ethan felt Maya shift slightly behind him. He could sense her processing this information, fitting it into what she knew about him. "That was war," Ethan said. "Different time, different man." "Maybe, but Morton tells me you made quite a scene in town, publicly humiliating Morrison, Talking about guardianship instead of ownership made you sound almost noble. But we both know better, don't we? You bought those women same as anyone else would have. You just paid more to feel better about it. Is there a point to this philosophy lesson, Davis? The point is, you can hand over the women and ride away, or I can take them anyway and leave you for the buzzards. Your choice. Ethan was quiet for a moment, seeming to consider. In reality, he was calculating angles, distances, cover. The rifle under the grain sacks was positioned perfectly. Maya had understood the game. He could feel her ready to move. Davis, he said finally, you ever wonder why they called me Ghost Walker? Some Indian nonsense about moving quietly. No, it's because in the war I learned that the difference between the quick and the dead wasn't speed. It was knowing when the fight started. And the fight started the moment you showed yourself. His hand had been resting on the grain sack. Now it moved, not fast but smooth, practiced. The Winchester came up, and Davis was still grinning when the first shot took him center mass. He looked surprised as he fell backward, as if he couldn't quite believe someone had beaten him on the draw. The other two men went for their guns, but Maya had already grabbed the Colt from Ethan's holster. She might have been White Eagle's daughter, raised with bows and lances, but she knew how to use a white man's weapon. 2 shots, 2 men down, though one was only wounded and trying to crawl to cover. Stay here, Ethan told the women, climbing down from the wagon. He approached the wounded man carefully, young, maybe 20, with the kind of face that hadn't yet learned to be cruel. Please, the young man gasped, blood spreading from the wound in his shoulder. Don't kill me. I'm not going to kill you, but you're going to take a message to Morrison. Tell him the women are under my protection now. Tell him if he comes for them, I won't be as merciful next time. You understand? The young man nodded frantically. Good. Now get out of here before I change my mind. As the wounded man stumbled away, Ethan returned to the wagon. Maya still held his Colt, but her hands were shaking now that the immediate danger had passed. You killed them, she said, her voice neutral. Not quite an accusation, but not approval either. I killed one. You wounded 2. I was aiming to kill. No, you weren't. If you were, they'd both be dead. You're your father's daughter. He knew when killing was necessary and when wounding would do. She handed him back his Colt, and their hands touched briefly in the exchange. You would have killed them all if needed? To protect you and Sarah? Yes. Even though you swore never to kill again? I swore not to kill unless I had no choice. Protecting innocent people from men like Davis? That's not murder. That's justice, or maybe just necessity. Sarah signed something, and Maya translated, her voice soft. She says the stones in your chest aren't stones at all. They're seeds, waiting for the right season to grow. They cleared Devil's Canyon as the sun began its descent toward the horizon, painting the desert in shades of gold and crimson. The incident with Davis had left them all tense, watching for more trouble, but the trail remained empty except for a family of javelinas that crossed ahead of them, the pig-like creatures snorting their displeasure at being disturbed. As darkness approached, Ethan's ranch came into view. It sat in a valley between 2 ridges, exactly as he'd described. The cabin was solid, built from pine logs he'd cut and hauled himself. A barn stood to the left, large enough for horses in storage. A small corral held 2 horses that whinnied a greeting as they approached. The vegetable garden, fenced against rabbits and deer, showed the last of the summer's growth. Apple trees, still young but promising, stood in neat rows. To Maya and Sarah, who had spent the last days in captivity, facing sale and abuse, it must have looked like paradise. This is home, Ethan said, and the word felt strange in his mouth. For 6 years, it had just been the ranch or the place, but bringing these women here, seeing it through their eyes, the word home had slipped out. He helped them down from the wagon, noticing how Sarah immediately moved to explore, her fear lessening in the face of this peaceful place. Maya stood still, taking it all in, her tactical mind noting exits, defensive positions, water sources. You built all this alone? She asked. Had help with the barn. Man named Tom Bradley served with me in the war. But the rest, yes. After your family died? Because they died. Needed something to do with my hands besides making fists. Inside the cabin, he lit kerosene lamps, revealing a single large room with distinct areas. A kitchen with a wood stove and shelves lined with preserves. A sitting area with 2 chairs he'd made himself and a small shelf of books. A bed in the corner, military neat with wool blankets. Everything clean, ordered, sparse. A monk's cell dressed as a frontier cabin. "You'll sleep there," he said, pointing to the bed. "I'll take the floor by the door." "We cannot take your bed," Maya protested. "You can and you will. You both need rest and healing. The bed's better for that." Sarah had found his small collection of books and was running her fingers over the spines. She pulled one out, a volume of Shakespeare he'd carried through the war, and signed excitedly to Maya. "She loves to read," Maya explained. "Our mother taught us both, said education was the one thing no one could steal from us." She was right. Sarah's welcome to any book there. As full darkness settled outside, Ethan prepared a simple meal. Beans he'd had soaking, cornbread from mix, the last of the dried beef, and coffee strong enough to float a horseshoe. They ate in companionable silence, the day's traumas temporarily held at bay by food and shelter and safety. After dinner, Sarah curled up on the bed with the Shakespeare, reading by lamplight. Maya helped Ethan clean the dishes, working beside him with an ease that surprised them both. "Tomorrow I'll ride to the Hendersons' place, 2 valleys over," Ethan said. "Mrs. Henderson might have clothes that would fit you better, and shoes. She'll ask questions, but she's decent people. And if Morrison comes while you're gone, he won't. He'll lick his wounds first, make a plan. Men like Morrison are dangerous because they're careful, but that caution gives us time." Later, with Sarah asleep and the lamps turned low, Maya and Ethan sat on the porch, looking out at the desert under starlight. The moon was rising full, turning the landscape into a study in silver and shadow. "My father told me about you," Maya said quietly. "Not your name, but the story. The white man who came to us broken and left whole. He said you had a good heart trapped in a bad world. Your father saw the best in people. He saw the truth in people. There's a difference." A coyote howled in the distance, answered by another, then another, until the night filled with their song. Sarah stirred but didn't wake. "That day in town," Maya said, "when Morrison said, 'Buy one, get one free,' I wanted to die, not from fear but from shame. To be reduced to that, to merchandise with a discount. My father was a chief, my mother was a healer, and I became a thing to be given away. You were never a thing. Morrison tried to make you one, but he failed. You stood on that platform with more dignity than anyone in that crowd possessed. Dignity doesn't stop bullets or change laws. No, but it changes how we face them." Maya was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "Sarah thinks we're meant to be here. She has dreams sometimes, sees things. She dreamed of you 3 nights ago. A sad white man with stones in his chest," she said, "who would carry us away from the darkness. I'm no one's destiny. I'm just a man trying to do one right thing after years of wrong ones. Maybe that's what destiny is." They sat in comfortable silence, 2 damaged people finding unexpected peace in shared presence. Inside, Sarah smiled in her sleep, the Shakespeare open on her chest. The moon continued its arc across the sky, and somewhere in the desert, an owl called, the sound both lonely and complete. Ethan thought about the day's events, from that horrible platform where human beings were reduced to a buy one get one free deal, to this moment of quiet safety. He'd spent $1,000, everything he had, but sitting here with Maya, knowing Sarah slept peacefully inside, he realized he'd received something worth far more. Not ownership, as Morrison had sneered. Not even the clearing of his debt to White Eagle, though that mattered. What he'd received was simpler and more complex. The possibility of redemption, the chance to protect instead of destroy, the unexpected gift of no longer being alone. Tomorrow would bring challenges. Morrison would come, with more men and better preparation. There would be violence, choices, the kind of crucible moments that revealed who people really were. But tonight, under the vast Arizona sky, 3 broken people had found temporary shelter in each other's company, and that was enough. The moon reached its zenith, flooding the valley with light that turned the cabin into something from a fairy tale. A place where curses might be broken and stories might find better endings than their beginnings promised. Sarah shifted in her sleep, murmuring something that might have been words, if anyone could have heard them clearly. Maya yawned. exhaustion finally overcoming vigilance. You should sleep, Ethan said. So should you. I will. Just want to watch a bit longer. Watch for what? I'm not sure. Maybe just watching to make sure it's real. That you're both here safe. That today happened in the way I remember. Maya stood, paused, then placed her hand briefly on his shoulder. It's real. We're real. And tomorrow, whatever comes, we'll face it together. She went inside, leaving Ethan alone with the night. But for the first time in 6 years, alone didn't feel like a sentence. It felt like a choice and one he could change when ready. The sound of soft breathing from inside the cabin mixed with the desert's nocturnal symphony. Ethan allowed himself a small smile, the first genuine one in longer than he could remember. He'd started the day intending to buy flour and bullets. He'd ended it by ransoming 2 lives from cruelty, killing a man who'd needed killing, and opening his home to strangers who were already becoming something more. Tomorrow would bring what it brought. But tonight, under the eternal stars, in a cabin that had suddenly become a home again, 3 souls who'd been lost in their own ways had found each other. And if that wasn't worth $1,000, Ethan thought, then nothing in this world had any value at all. Dawn came slowly to the valley, painting the eastern ridge in shades of rose and gold before spilling light across the ranch. Ethan woke as he always did, instantly alert, hand reaching for the rifle that leaned against the wall. 6 years of solitary vigilance had carved habits into his bones that wouldn't easily fade. But this morning was different. The soft sound of breathing came from his bed, where Maya and Sarah slept, curled together like children despite their years. Sarah's face, unmarked by the perpetual fear of yesterday, looked younger in sleep. Maya's hand rested protectively on her sister's shoulder, even in dreams maintaining her role as guardian. Ethan moved quietly, long practice making his boots silent on the wooden floor. He rebuilt the fire in the stove, set coffee to brewing, and stepped onto the porch to scan the horizon. No dust clouds, no movement except a hawk circling lazily above the southern ridge. Morrison would come, but not yet. The man was too careful to rush, too proud to accept public humiliation without planning perfect revenge. The screen door creaked softly and Maya stepped out, wrapped in one of his blankets. Her hair was loose, falling past her waist in waves that caught the morning light. The bruises on her face had darkened overnight, purple and yellow painting a map of Morrison's cruelty across her cheekbone. You didn't sleep, she observed, noting the tension in his shoulders, the way his eyes never stopped moving across the landscape. Slept enough. Liar. But she said it gently, almost with affection. My father did the same thing, watched over us even when there was no danger, as if vigilance alone could prevent bad things. Your father was a wise man. My father was a worried man. There's a difference. She moved to stand beside him, close enough that he could smell the sage and cedar that still clung to her hair despite everything. Morrison won't come today. How do you know? Because men like him need their pride rebuilt before they act. He'll gather more men, make bigger promises, convince himself that yesterday was luck, not skill. 3 days, maybe 4. Then he'll come. Ethan studied her profile in the morning light. The defiant girl of 10 he remembered had become a woman who understood strategy, who read men's motivations like tracks in sand. You speak from experience. Morrison tried to buy me from my father 3 times over 2 years. Each time my father refused, Morrison would disappear for days, then return with more men, more money, more threats. The pattern never changed. Until he killed your father. Maya's jaw tightened. Yes, the 4th time, he didn't come to bargain. Inside, Sarah stirred, sitting up with the unfocused look of someone emerging from deep sleep. Her eyes found Maya first, assuring herself of safety, then Ethan. She signed something rapid and complex. She asks if the coffee she smells is real or if she's still dreaming. Maya translated, a small smile touching her lips. Real, Ethan said, then added in the military sign language he knew, good morning. Sarah's eyes widened with delight. She signed back, slowly so he could follow. You speak with hands? Little bit, army teaching. Not good like you. Sarah smiled, the first full smile he'd seen from her, and it transformed her face from pretty to beautiful. She signed something to Maya, who laughed Actually laughed, the sound like water in the desert. She says you sign like a bear trying to paint. Clumsy but sincere. After breakfast, cornmeal porridge with molasses and the last of the canned peaches, Ethan showed them around the ranch properly. The barn held his two horses, Brandy and Sage, both mares he'd raised from colts. The tool shed was organized with military precision, every implement in its place. The garden, despite the late season, still produced tomatoes, squash, and beans. You could live here forever without seeing another soul, Maya observed. That was the idea. Was? He didn't answer directly. Instead, he led them to a small outbuilding he used for storage. In the Sienna, along with sacks of grain and preserved foods, were several trunks. These were Mary's things, he said, opening one trunk to reveal dresses, simple but well made. She was taller than you, Maya, but not by much. These might fit with some alteration. And these, he opened another, smaller trunk, were Emma's. She would have been about Sarah's size now if... He didn't finish. Sarah reached out tentatively, touching a blue dress with tiny yellow flowers embroidered on the collar. She looked at Ethan with a question in her eyes. She can have it. Have all of it. Mary would have wanted... She always said pretty things should be worn, not stored. Maya lifted a green dress from the trunk, holding it against herself. We cannot take your family's things. They're not my family's things anymore. My family is gone. These are just cloth and thread waiting to be useful again. While the women sorted through the clothes, Ethan walked the perimeter of his property, checking defensive positions. The ranch's location in the valley provided natural protection on three sides, with only the eastern approach offering easy access. He'd chosen this spot partly for its water, partly for its defensibility, habits from the war dying hard. At the tool shed, he retrieved items he had hoped never to need again. A second Winchester rifle, well-oiled and loaded, boxes of ammunition, a Bowie knife that had saved his life twice, and wrapped in oilcloth the Sharps rifle he'd used as a sniper, the weapon that had earned him the name Angel of Death at Antietam. He was cleaning the Sharps when Maya found him, now wearing Mary's green dress. It had been taken in at the waist, the hem raised slightly. She looked nothing like Mary had looked in it, yet somehow she looked exactly right. Sarah's altering the blue dress, she said, then noticed the rifle. That's not a normal ranch gun. No. How many men did you kill with it? 67 confirmed, probably more. And it bothers you. Every single one. Maya sat on a crate nearby, watching his practiced movements as he cleaned and checked the weapon. My father killed 32 men in his life. He remembered each one, could tell you their faces, the circumstances, the necessity. He said a man who doesn't remember his kills is a monster, but a man destroyed by them is useless. Your father was philosophical for a warrior. All good warriors are philosophers. How else could they do what needs doing and remain human? Ethan set the Sharps aside and looked at her directly. Why didn't Sarah speak when she could have? Why maintain the fiction of being mute? Maya was quiet for a moment, choosing her words. The day Morrison killed our father, he made Sarah watch, made our mother watch. He said words had power, that father's words had turned the tribe against selling land, against progress. He said if anyone else spoke against him, he'd cut out their tongue. She paused, her hand unconsciously moving to her throat. Sarah was 15. She'd been singing when Morrison's men arrived, a harvest song our grandmother taught her. After father died, after Morrison's threat, she just stopped. Not just singing, but all words. Like she was afraid her voice itself could bring death. But she could speak if she wanted? The healers think so. They say her voice is trapped by fear, not injury. Sometimes at night I hear her whisper in her dreams. But awake, nothing for 4 years. Until yesterday. Maya looked at him sharply. What? Yesterday, when Davis ambushed us, I heard her make a sound, small but real, when I gave her the peaches. Hope flickered across Maya's face, quickly suppressed. Don't give me hope unless you're certain. I'm certain of what I heard. Maybe being away from Morrison, being safe, maybe it's letting her voice find its way back. Before Maya could respond, Sarah appeared in the doorway wearing the altered blue dress. The transformation was remarkable. Gone was the terrified girl from the platform. In her place stood a young woman whose eyes, while still wary, held something that hadn't been there before. Possibility. She signed rapidly to Maya, who translated. She says the dress makes her feel like a person again, not a thing to be sold. She thanks you for your wife's gift. Your sister can thank Mary herself when we visit the graves later, Ethan said. I think Mary would like to know her dresses are being worn again. The afternoon brought unexpected developments. Ethan was reinforcing the gate when he heard a sound he hadn't heard in 6 years. Laughter. Not just Maya's quiet chuckle, but bright, sustained laughter. He found the sisters by the corral where Sarah was trying to feed carrots to Brandy. The mare, always particular about strangers, kept pulling her head away at the last second, making Sarah chase her with increasingly elaborate gestures. Maya was translating Sarah's signed commentary, which apparently included unflattering comparisons between the horse and various stubborn relatives. She says your horse has the personality of our great-aunt Sage Flower, who once refused to speak to anyone for a month because someone used her best pot for dyeing cloth. Maya gasped between laughs. Ethan found himself smiling, then actually chuckling, the sound rusty from disuse. Brandy, perhaps offended by the laughter, finally accepted the carrot with exaggerated dignity. Would you like to learn to ride? He asked Sarah, signing the question as best he could. Sarah's eyes widened with excitement, then dimmed with worry. She signed rapidly. She says she would love to, but she's afraid she's too clumsy, Maya translated. Tell her, Ethan said, that I once saw a one-legged man win a horse race. Clumsy is just another word for unpracticed. That afternoon, he taught both sisters basic riding skills. Maya proved to be a natural, having ridden since childhood. Sarah was more tentative, but her determination was fierce. When she finally managed to guide Sage around the corral alone, her face glowed with achievement. You're a good teacher, Maya observed as they watched Sarah practice. I had a good teacher myself, sergeant named Mitchell, toughest man I ever met. He said teaching was just patience mixed with stubbornness. Is that why you're teaching us to shoot? Ethan looked at her, surprised by her perception. He had indeed been planning to suggest it. Morrison will come. You should both know how to defend yourselves. Father taught me the bow. I can hit a rabbit at 50 yards. Morrison's men won't be using bows. That evening, as the sun painted the valley in shades of amber, Ethan set up targets against the hillside. Empty cans and bottles at varying distances. He started with the basics. How to hold a rifle, how to breathe, how to squeeze rather than pull the trigger. Maya absorbed the lessons quickly, her natural coordination translating well to marksmanship. Sarah struggled more with the rifle's weight, but refused to give up. When she finally hit her first target, a bottle at 20 yards, she jumped up and down with silent joy. Your turn, Maya said, handing Ethan the rifle. Show us what the angel of death can do. Ethan hesitated, then took the Winchester. Without seeming to aim, he fired 5 shots in rapid succession. 5 cans flew off the fence posts, each hit dead center. The sisters stared at him with new understanding. This wasn't just skill, it was artistry, terrible and beautiful. Could you teach us that? Maya asked quietly. I could teach you to shoot that well. I pray you'll never need to. After dinner, bean stew with vegetables from the garden, Sarah retreated to the porch with another of Ethan's books, this one a collection of poems by Wordsworth. Maya helped clean the dishes, working beside Ethan with an ease that felt both new and ancient. Can I ask you something, Maya said, drying a plate with careful attention. Ask. Yesterday when Morrison said buy one, get one free, when he tried to give Sarah away like she was worthless, I saw your face. That wasn't just anger. That was personal. Ethan was quiet for a long moment, his hands still in the soapy water. When Emma was born, she was small. Too small. The doctor said she wouldn't survive the night, that we should prepare ourselves. And he actually said, and I'll never forget this, at least you're young, you can have another. Consider this practice. He pulled his hands from the water, drying them slowly. Like my daughter was disposable. Like she didn't matter because she was small and weak. Mary threw the doctor out, literally grabbed him by the collar and shoved him out the door. Then she held Emma all night, singing to her, talking to her, telling her she was loved and wanted and necessary. Emma survived. 6 years, 6 perfect years before the fever took her. And every one of those years was a gift that doctor would have denied us. So yes, when Morrison tried to throw Sarah in like she was worthless, like she didn't matter, it was personal. Maya reached out and touched his arm gently. Mary sounds like she was a fighter. She was. Tougher than me in all the ways that mattered. She would have liked you. Because I'm tough? Because you protect Sarah the way she protected Emma, fierce and without question. They moved to the porch where Sarah was reading by lamplight. The desert had cooled and the stars were emerging, brilliant in the clear air. Coyotes called in the distance, their song haunting and wild. Tomorrow I need to ride to the Henderson Ranch, Ethan said. They need to know what might be coming, and they might have supplies we could use. You trust them? Tom Henderson rode with me in the war. His wife Alice is one of the few people in the territory who treats everyone the same, regardless of skin color. Their ranch is 3 hours north. I'll be back by nightfall. And if Morrison comes while you're gone, he won't. But if anyone else does, he handed Maya his Colt. You know what to do. Maya hefted the weapon, checking its balance. We'll be fine. I know you will. Sarah looked up from her book and signed something. Maya smiled as she translated. She says the poems are beautiful but sad, like the poet knew about stones in the chest, too. Most poets do, Ethan replied. It's what makes them poets instead of accountants. The next morning brought an unexpected visitor. Sheriff Brennan arrived alone, his horse lathered with sweat from hard riding. Ethan met him at the gate, rifle visible but not quite pointed. Ethan, Brennan said, not dismounting, we need to talk. So talk. Morrison's filed a complaint. Says you stole his property. Hard to steal what can't be owned. Brennan shifted uncomfortably in his saddle. Look, I know what Morrison is, but he's got connections, money, influence. He could make things difficult for you, Morrison. He's already trying. This is different. He's talking about bringing in federal marshals, claiming you're harboring fugitives. He's got paperwork showing he had legal custody of those women. Fraudulent paperwork. Maybe, but can you prove it? More importantly, can you prove it before a marshal shows up with a warrant? Ethan studied Brennan. The man was corrupt, but not entirely without conscience. What do you want, Sheriff? I want this to go away quiet-like. Morrison's willing to drop everything if you return the women. He'll even refund part of your money, say $500. No, that's it. Ethan, be reasonable. I said no. Those women are under my protection now. If Morrison wants them, he'll have to go through me. And if you're smart, Sheriff, you'll stay out of it. Brennan's face flushed. Are you threatening me? I'm giving you advice. Morrison's used to buying his way out of trouble, but some things can't be bought, and some men can't be scared. You decide which side of this you want to be on. From the cabin, Maya emerged, wearing Mary's green dress and carrying a bucket of water with practiced ease. She looked every inch the ranch woman, as if she'd been here years instead of days. Brennan's eyes followed her, and something shifted in his expression. That's White Eagle's daughter, he said quietly. You knew him? Met him once, years back. He kept his people out of the worst of the Apache wars, tried to find peace. Morrison bragged about killing him, said he was teaching the savages about progress. And you did nothing. Brennan's shoulders sagged. What could I do? Morrison owns half the town, has the other half in debt to him. But White Eagle, he was a good man, better than most whites I know. Then do one right thing, Sheriff. Stay away from here. Let Morrison come if he's coming, but don't be part of it. Brennan looked at Maya again, then at Sarah, who had appeared in the doorway. 3 days, he said finally. Morrison's gathering men from Tucson, promising big money. Davis you already met. There's also Cole Jackson, Bill Harrow, and some Mexican named Valdez, who's supposed to be good with knives, maybe 15 men total. Why are you telling me this? Because maybe I'm tired of being the kind of man who does nothing. He turned his horse. 3 days, Ethan. Be ready. As the sheriff rode away, Maya approached. You trust him? I trust that he's more scared of his conscience than Morrison right now. Whether that lasts? Ethan shrugged. We'll see. That afternoon, Tom Henderson arrived with his wife Alice and their 2 grown sons, James and Robert. Ethan had sent word with a passing rider, and true to their friendship, The Hendersons came. Tom was Ethan's age, weathered by sun and war, missing his left ear from shrapnel at his Chancellorsville. Alice was 10 years younger, a woman whose kindness was matched only by her ferocity when protecting those she considered family. "So these are the women all of Copper Creek is talking about," Alice said, looking Maya and Sarah over with a practiced eye. "Morrison's telling everyone you kidnapped them, Ethan. Says you're touched in the head with grief, trying to replace your family." "Morrison says a lot of things." "True enough." Alice turned to Maya. "I knew your mother, child. Singing bird. We traded sometimes at the summer gathering. She made the finest beadwork I ever saw." Maya's composure cracked slightly. "You knew my mother?" "Knew her and respected her. She once doctored my James when he was snake-bit, wouldn't take payment except for a promise that we'd teach any Apache child who wanted to learn to read. We kept that promise." Tom was examining Ethan's defensive preparations with a soldier's eye. 15 men, Brennan says? That's the count. Defensible position, good sight lines, but you're outnumbered 5-1. 3-1, James said quietly. "Robert and I aren't leaving you to face this alone." "This isn't your fight," Ethan protested. "Hell it isn't," Robert replied. "Morrison's been a poison in this territory for years. Someone needs to stop him." "Besides," Alice added, pulling a shotgun from their wagon, "I never did like men who treat women as property. Reminds me too much of the old days before the war." Sarah had been watching silently, but now she signed rapidly to Maya. "She asks if you've come to help or to judge," Maya translated, then added, "Sarah doesn't trust easily anymore." Alice approached Sarah slowly as one might approach a spooked horse. From her bag, she pulled out a small object and held it out. It was a wooden whistle, beautifully carved. "This was my daughter's," Alice said softly. "Rebecca. She died of scarlet fever 10 years ago. She was about your age." She placed the whistle in Sarah's surprised hands. "Sometimes when words won't come, music helps. You don't need voice to make music." Sarah's eyes filled with tears. She brought the whistle to her lips and blew softly. A clear, sweet note emerged, the first sound she'd intentionally made in 4 years. Everyone froze. Maya's hand went to her mouth. Ethan felt something tighten his chest loosen. Sarah looked startled at herself, then blew again, stronger this time. The note hung in the air like a prayer answered. "Well," Tom said gruffly, clearing his throat, "I'd say that's worth fighting for." The next 2 days passed in a blur of preparation. Tom and his sons helped Ethan fortify the ranch, creating defensive positions, clearing fields of fire, setting up water barrels in case of fire. Alice worked with Maya and Sarah, teaching them field medicine, how to load quickly, how to stay calm under fire. "I was a nurse in the war," Alice explained, showing Maya how to pack a wound. "Saw too many boys die from infections that proper cleaning could have prevented. If fighting comes, there'll be wounded. Best to be ready." Sarah had taken to carrying the whistle constantly, occasionally bringing it to her lips for a single note, as if testing that sound was still possible. She hadn't spoken yet, but the silence no longer seemed like a prison. On the second night, as they all sat around Ethan's table sharing a meal, James asked, "Mr. Cross, why'd you really pay so much for them?" "Tom says you spent everything you had." Ethan looked at Maya and Sarah, then at the assembled group that had somehow become something like family in just days. "You ever see something that's just wrong? So wrong that walking away from it would break something inside you that could never be fixed?" James nodded slowly. "Yeah, I have. Morrison had these two on a platform, selling them like cattle. Actually said buy one, get one free, like Sarah here was just a throw-in, something worthless he wanted to get rid of. And all I could think about was my Emma, how the doctor wanted to throw her away because she was small. How Mary and I got 6 beautiful years because we didn't listen to him." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "I couldn't save my own family, but maybe I could save someone else's. Maybe that's what we're all trying to do here. Save something worth saving in a world that seems bent on destroying anything good." Alice reached over and squeezed his hand. "Mary would be proud of you, Ethan Cross." "I hope so." Sarah suddenly stood up, the whistle in her hand. She looked at each person around the table, then brought the whistle to her lips. What emerged wasn't just random notes, but a melody, hesitant and simple, but unmistakably music. It was a lullaby, one her mother had sung, one she'd hummed in her dreams. When she finished, the room was silent. Then Maya whispered in Apache, translating her own words. She says thank you. Thank you for seeing her worth when others saw nothing. Tell her, Ethan replied, his voice rough, that her worth was always there. We just had the eyes to see it. Tomorrow Morrison would come. There would be blood and violence and the kind of choices that mark souls forever. But tonight, in a cabin that had been a tomb for 6 years, life had returned. A family not of blood but of choice had formed, bound by shared danger and unexpected love. The moon rose full over the valley, and somewhere in the darkness, a screech owl called. Its sound no longer ominous, but simply part of the desert's endless song. Inside, Sarah played her whistle while Maya sang softly in Apache. The Henderson boys cleaned weapons while their parents planned defensive strategies with Ethan. This wasn't how any of them had imagined their lives would go. But sometimes, Ethan thought, the unexpected gifts were the ones that mattered most. Morrison could come with his army of hired guns. They would be ready, not because they were warriors, though some were, but because they were family now. And family, whether by blood or choice, was always worth fighting for. The morning of the third day dawned blood red, the sky painted in shades that promised violence. Ethan stood on his porch, coffee growing cold in his hand, watching dust devils dance across the valley floor. The Hendersons had stayed through the night, and now Tom stood beside him, both men reading the landscape with soldiers' eyes. Winds from the south, Tom observed. They'll likely come from the east, use the sun at their backs. Morrison's not a soldier. He'll come straight on, expecting fear to do half his work. And when fear doesn't work, then we'll see what he's really made of. Inside, the women were preparing. Alice had brought medical supplies, turning Ethan's table into a field hospital. Maya cleaned rifles with mechanical precision, while Sarah sat by the window, the wooden whistle in her lap, watching the horizon with eyes that had aged years and days. Sarah wants to know if killing in defense of family is still killing, Maya said, translating her sister's signs. Ethan considered his answer carefully. Yes, it's still killing. But sometimes the choice isn't between killing and not killing. It's between protecting innocent people and letting evil win. Your father understood that. Sarah signed something else, and Maya's voice was soft as she translated. She says our father once told her that warriors don't fight because they hate what's in front of them, but because they love what's behind them. Your father was a wise man. James and Robert had taken positions at the windows, rifles ready. James, barely 20, tried to hide his nervousness with bravado. Robert, 2 years older, had their mother's steady calm. Mr. Cross, Robert said, I've been thinking, if Morrison really has 15 men, we need to even the odds somehow. What did you have in mind? The canyon entrance to your valley. One man with enough ammunition could hold it for a while, make them think twice about a frontal assault. One man would be trapped there when they eventually break through. Not if he had a horse hidden nearby and knew the back trails. Robert's jaw set stubbornly. I know those trails. Hunted them since I was 12. Ethan started to protest, but Tom interrupted. The boy's right, it's good tactics. It's also a death sentence if something goes wrong. Everything's a death sentence if something goes wrong, Alice said matter-of-factly, loading her shotgun. At least this gives us advantage. They came at noon when the sun was highest and shadows shortest. 15 men, just as Brennan had warned, spreading out in a loose line as they approached the ranch. Morrison rode in the center, his silk vest replaced with leather, playing at being a warrior. Will Davis's body must have been found and buried, but his cousin, Jake Davis, rode at Morrison's right, face set with vengeance. The Mexican, Valdez, rode on the left, twin pistols visible, knives strapped to his thighs. But it was the man riding slightly behind Morrison who made Ethan's blood chill. Cole Blackheart Mason, tall, scarred, with dead eyes that had seen too much violence and learned to love it. Ethan had heard stories. Mason had ridden with Quantrill's raiders during the war, had been part of the Lawrence massacre. Since then, he'd sold his gun to whoever paid highest, leaving bodies across 3 territories. That's Mason, Tom breathed. Jesus Christ, Ethan, that's Cole Mason. I see him. Morrison stopped his group just outside rifle range. close enough to be heard clearly. "Cross, I've come from my property. Send out the squaws and we'll ride away. No one needs to die today." Ethan stepped onto the porch, Winchester in hand, but not raised. "They're not property, Morrison. They're free women under my protection." "Protection?" Morrison laughed. "You've got what, 5 guns in there? I've got 15 of the best fighters money can buy." "Then you overpaid." Mason spoke for the first time, his voice like gravel over glass. "Ethan Cross, the Ghost Walker. I heard about you, 67 kills at Antietam. Impressive for a Union man." "The war's been over 12 years, Mason." "War's never over, just changes location." Mason shifted slightly in his saddle. "Morrison's paying me 500 to kill you, but I'd do it for free, just to see if the legend matches the man." "Legends are usually disappointing." "We'll see." Morrison raised his hand and his men began spreading wider, trying to flank the cabin. That's when Robert opened fire from the canyon entrance. The first shot took one of Morrison's men out of the saddle. The second sent another's horse bucking, throwing its rider. Suddenly, what seemed like dozens of shots echoed from the canyon, though Ethan knew it was just Robert firing and moving, making himself seem like multiple defenders. "It's a trap!" someone shouted, and Morrison's organized approach dissolved into chaos. "Hold positions!" Morrison screamed, but 3 of his men were already retreating toward cover. That's when Maya acted. She climbed onto the roof during the night, hidden behind the chimney with Ethan Sharp's rifle. Her first shot took Jake Davis in the shoulder, spinning him off his horse. Her second killed the man next to him clean. The battlefield erupted. Morrison's men dove for whatever cover they could find. Rocks, trees, an old wagon Ethan had been meaning to repair. Gunfire filled the air like deadly rain. Inside, Alice moved between windows, firing her shotgun at anyone who got too close. Sarah loaded rifles with surprising speed, her silent efficiency keeping the defenders supplied. James had taken position at the back window, preventing flanking movements. But Mason remained calm in the chaos, directing Morrison's remaining men with hand signals, slowly tightening a noose around the cabin. 2 hours into the siege, with ammunition running low and Robert still holding the canyon but obviously tiring, Sarah suddenly stood up. She walked to the center of the room, ignoring Alice's attempts to pull her back to safety. She raised the wooden whistle to her lips and began to play. Not the simple melody from before, but something complex, haunting. The notes seemed to cut through the gunfire, causing a strange lull in the fighting. Then she stopped, lowered the whistle, and spoke. "Morrison!" Her voice was cracked, hoarse from years of silence, but it carried across the battlefield. "Morrison, I know what you want." Everyone froze. Maya gasped. Ethan turned from the window to stare. Sarah was speaking. Morrison's voice came back, shocked but eager. "The mute speaks. Miracle of miracles. What do you know, girl?" "The 7 scrolls, Father's treasure. I know where they are." "Sarah, no," Maya hissed, but Sarah held up her hand. "I'll tell you," Sarah continued, each word obviously painful but determined. "But only you. Come to the porch, alone. I'll tell you where they are, and you leave. Everyone lives." "It's a trap," Mason said loudly. "Shut up," Morrison snapped. His greed was winning over caution. "All right, girl, I'm coming, but if this is a trick, everyone dies." Morrison dismounted and walked slowly toward the porch, hands visible but ready to draw. Ethan moved to stop Sarah, but she looked at him with such fierce determination that he stepped back. Sarah walked onto the porch, Maya and Ethan flanking her, but staying back. Morrison stopped 10 feet away, close enough to hear but not close enough to grab. "Where are they?" he demanded. Sarah's voice grew stronger with each word, as if 4 years of silence had built up pressure that was finally releasing. "First, you need to know what they really are. Not gold, not silver. Knowledge. Medical knowledge that could save thousands. Maps to water that could turn desert into farmland. Weather predictions that could prevent famines. I don't care what they are, where. Hidden in the place where you killed my father." Her voice hardened, buried beneath his blood. "But here's what you don't know, Morrison. The scrolls were treated with the Apache poison. Anyone who handles them without the antidote dies within hours. Painfully." Morrison's face went pale. You're lying. Remember Jose Cardenas? He helped you search our camp after you killed father. He touched one scroll you missed. Remember how he died, screaming, bleeding from his eyes? Morrison did remember. Cardenas had died horribly 2 days after the raid, and no doctor could explain why. The antidote, Sarah continued, requires 3 ingredients. I know 2. Maya knows the third. Kill either of us, you'll never survive retrieving the scrolls. Tell me the antidote, and I'll let you all live. No, Sarah's voice was firm. Here's my offer. You leave now forever. Never come near us again. In 1 year, I'll send you 1 scroll. The medical one, you can sell it, get rich, but slowly. Try to take us. Try to hurt anyone here, and you get nothing but death. Morrison's face contorted with rage and greed. You little Apache bitch, you think you can negotiate with me? I own this territory. That's when Mason spoke up, his voice carrying clearly. Morrison, take the deal. What? Morrison spun to face his hired gun. The girl's smart. She's giving you profit without risk. More importantly, Mason's dead eyes fixed on Sarah with something almost like respect. She's not lying about the poison. I've seen Apache war medicine. They know things about killing that would make your hair white. Morrison wrestled with himself visibly. Then surprisingly, he laughed. You know what? Fine, but I want guarantees. You'll get them, Sarah said, when you're gone. But Morrison wasn't done. His laugh turned mean, ugly. Before I go, though, Cross, you should know something. Your precious wife and daughter, they didn't die of fever. Ethan went very still. What? Oh, you didn't know? Morrison's grin was vicious. Mason here was working for me 6 years ago. I wanted your land for the silver deposits. You wouldn't sell. So Mason put something in your well while you were gone. Something slow-acting. By the time symptoms showed, it looked like fever. The world seemed to stop. Ethan's vision tunneled to Morrison's grinning face. Behind him, he heard Maya's sharp intake of breath, Alice's gasp, Tom's curse. You murdered my family, Ethan said, his voice deadly quiet. A 6-year-old child. Business, Cross, nothing personal. Mason spoke up, his tone matter of fact. Actually, Morrison, that's not entirely accurate. Morrison turned, confused. What? I did poison the well, but it was meant for Cross alone. Slow-acting, yes, but specifically dosed for a man his size. The woman and child, Mason shrugged. They drank more water, weighed less. It hit them faster, harder. If I'd known there was a child, I'd have refused the job. I'm a killer, Morrison, but I have limits. What difference does it make? Morrison snapped. The difference, Mason said, drawing his gun in one fluid motion and shooting Morrison in the chest, is that you lied to me. You said Cross lived alone. Morrison fell backward, blood spreading across his chest. He tried to speak, but only bloody bubbles emerged. His eyes, shocked and disbelieving, found Sarah. The scrolls, he gasped. Sarah looked down at him with pity. There are no scrolls, Morrison. Father burned them before you came. Said knowledge used for evil was better destroyed. She knelt beside the dying man, but you needed to believe they existed. It was the only way to control you. Morrison died with his eyes open, greed and rage frozen on his face forever. The remaining men looked at Mason, waiting for orders. He holstered his gun and addressed them calmly. Contract's dead with Morrison. Anyone wants to continue this? That's personal, not professional. Personally, I've got no quarrel with Cross or these women. Jake Davis, arm in a sling from Maya's shot, snarled, They killed Will? Will drew on them first. That's on him. Mason's tone brooked no argument. Anyone else want to make this personal? Most of the men began backing away, heading for their horses. They'd come for money, not principle, and the money was dead on the ground. But Davis and 3 others remained. This isn't over, Cross, Davis shouted. Mason sighed, then shot Davis in the head. The body crumpled next to Morrison's. The 3 remaining men fled. Mason looked at Ethan. You'll want to kill me now, for your family. I understand. But before you do, know this. I've killed 43 people for money. Your wife and daughter are the only ones I regret. If I could undo it, I would. Ethan raised his Winchester, sighting down the barrel at Mason's head. His finger tightened on the trigger. Mary's laugh echoed in his memory. Emma's small hand in his. Ethan, Maya said softly, suddenly beside him, he's giving you the choice, but killing him won't bring them back. He murdered them. Yes, and he'll carry that forever. Death would be a mercy. Let him live with it. Ethan's rifle trembled. 6 years of grief, of guilt, of self-hatred for not being there, all focused on the man in his sights. Then Sarah spoke, her recovered voice still hoarse but growing stronger. Mr. Ethan, would your Mary want this? Would Emma? The rifle lowered slowly. No, Ethan said quietly. They wouldn't. Mason nodded once. I'll leave the territory. Won't come back. That's all I can offer. That's not enough. No, Mason agreed. It's not. Nothing ever could be. He mounted his horse and rode away without looking back. The others followed, leaving Morrison's and Davis's bodies in the dust. Robert emerged from the canyon, exhausted but triumphant. He'd held off 5 men single-handedly, killing 2 and wounding another. Tom clapped his son on the back with pride while Alice fussed over a graze on his arm. They buried Morrison and Davis at the edge of the property, no words spoken over the graves. Morrison's horse and belongings would be sold, the money given to Apache families he'd destroyed. As the sun set, painting the valley in softer shades than the morning's blood red, they gathered in Ethan's cabin. Sarah hadn't stopped talking, 4 years of words pouring out in a flood. She told stories, asked questions, sang half-remembered songs. My voice, she said wonderingly. I thought it was gone forever. But when I saw everyone fighting for us, dying for us, I realized silence was selfish. You needed to know the truth. There really are no scrolls? James asked. Sarah smiled. Oh, there are scrolls, but not hidden. Maya and I have them memorized, every word. Father made us learn them before he burned the physical copies. The knowledge is safe in here. She tapped her temple. And the poison? Robert asked. Real, but not on the scrolls. It's a contact poison Father knew how to make. Morrison's man really did die from it, but from touching things in our camp, not scrolls. Tom laughed, shaking his head. You outmaneuvered him completely. A 19-year-old girl destroyed Jake Morrison with words. Words and family, Sarah corrected, looking around the room at all of them. Later, as the Hendersons prepared to leave, Alice pulled Ethan aside. You did right not killing Mason. Mary wouldn't have wanted you to become him. I wanted to. God help me, I wanted to. But you didn't. That's what matters. After they left, Ethan found Maya on the porch, looking at the stars. The desert had reclaimed its peace, as if the day's violence had never happened. You saved my life today, he said, talking me out of killing Mason. You saved ours first. Seems fair. They stood in comfortable silence. Then Maya said, Sarah's not the only one who found her voice today. You spoke about Mary and Emma. First time since we've been here, you've said their names easily. It hurt less than I expected. Maybe because, he paused, searching for words, because I wasn't alone when I said them. Maya moved closer, not quite touching, but near enough that he could feel her warmth. You're not alone now. No, he agreed, I'm not. Sarah appeared in the doorway, her whistle in one hand, a book in the other. I want to learn everything, she announced. Reading, writing, arithmetic, geography, history, everything I missed while I was silent. That's a lot of learning, Ethan said, smiling. We have time, don't we? Now that Morrison's gone? Yes, Maya answered, looking at Ethan with something soft in her eyes. We have time. 3 days later, a letter arrived via a passing trader. It was from Sheriff Brennan. Cross, Morrison's death has been ruled self-defense. Witnesses confirm Mason shot him, not you. The town council has seized Morrison's assets to pay his debts. Turns out he owed nearly everyone something. There's talk of you and the Apache women. Some good, some bad. But Alice Henderson has been telling everyone how the young one got her voice back, calling it a miracle. Public opinion is shifting. The federal marshal came and went, found no evidence of kidnapping, especially after Sarah herself told him she chose to stay with you. He seemed impressed by her, actually. You should know Mason left the territory as promised. Word is he's gone to Mexico. Don't expect him back. Stay out of town for a month or so. Let things settle. Then come in. There's going to be an election for mayor. Tom Henderson's running. Could use your support. Brennan P.S. I'm resigning as sheriff. 30 years of looking the other way is enough. Maybe the next man will be better. Ethan shared the letter with Maya and Sarah. Sarah immediately began composing a response, her newly found voice extending to newly discovered writing. Tell him we'll come to town when it's safe, she said, pen scratching across paper. And that we're a family now, so they better get used to seeing us together. Are we? Ethan asked quietly. A family? Sarah looked at him like he was slow. Of course we are. Maya loves you, you love her, but haven't said it yet. And I'm the sister who's going to drive you both crazy with questions and songs and probably grandchildren someday when I meet someone who doesn't mind that I'm Apache and occasionally go silent when I'm thinking hard. Maya blushed deeply. Ethan coughed. Sarah laughed, the sound bright as morning. See? Family. Awkward. Conversations and all. The wedding was small, held beneath the cottonwood tree that shaded Mary and Emma's graves. Ethan had worried it might be wrong, but Sarah had convinced him otherwise. They're part of your stories, she'd said. Pretending they're not would be the disrespect. This way, they're new. By the way they're included. Tom Henderson officiated, having been elected mayor and given the authority. Alice stood as Maya's witness, Sarah as Ethan's. The ceremony mixed Apache traditions with American ones, creating something new, unique to them. Maya wore her mother's wedding dress, retrieved from relatives who'd preserved it. Ethan wore his one good suit, altered by Sarah, who'd become surprisingly adept with needle and thread. Do you, Maya, daughter of White Eagle and Singing Bird, take this man as your husband? I do. Do you, Ethan Cross, take this woman as your wife? Ethan looked at Maya, radiant in the afternoon sun, then glanced at the graves beneath the tree. He could almost feel Mary's approval, Emma's giggle of delight. I do. Then by the power vested in me by the territory of Arizona and the grace of God, I pronounce you married. They kissed, soft and sweet, while Sarah played a wedding song on her whistle, the notes carrying across the valley like a blessing. 5 years later, the valley had changed. Where once a single cabin stood, now 3 buildings formed a small compound. The original cabin expanded twice. A schoolhouse where Sarah taught Apache and white children together. A barn large enough for the growing horse breeding operation Maya had started. Ethan stood on the same porch, but everything else was different. Maya emerged from inside carrying their son, Thomas White Eagle Cross, 2 years old with his mother's dark hair and his father's blue eyes. Their daughter, Mary Singing Bird Cross, 4 years old, ran ahead chasing a butterfly. Sarah had married Robert Henderson 3 years ago, their courtship a source of endless entertainment as the once silent woman talked circles around the steady young man. They lived in town but visited often, Sarah still teaching but also documenting the Apache knowledge she and Maya had memorized, creating new scrolls for future generations. Letter from Mason, Maya said, handing Ethan an envelope. He tensed. Mason wrote once a year, always on the anniversary of Mary and Emma's death. The letters were always the same, updates on his whereabouts, renewed apologies, and donations to Apache families orphaned by violence. This one was different. Cross, this is my last letter. I'm dying. Consumption, doctor says. Weeks at most. I need you to know something. Your wife, the night before she died, she forgave me. Don't know how she knew I was responsible, but she did. I came to watch, to see my handiwork. She saw me through the window, recognized me from town. She came outside, so weak she could barely stand. Said she forgave me because hate would poison her daughter's last moments worse than anything I'd done. Said she hoped someday I'd find what I'd tried to destroy, a reason to be better. I never forgot that. It's why I killed Morrison when he revealed the truth. Why I've spent 5 years trying to atone. I'm not asking for forgiveness. Just wanted you to know Mary was the strongest person I ever met. You were lucky to have her. Now you're lucky again with Maya. Don't waste it. Mason. Ethan folded the letter carefully, then handed it to Maya. She read it, tears forming in her eyes. She forgave him, Maya whispered. Mary forgave him. She was always stronger than me that way. No, Maya said firmly. You let him live. You chose not to become him. That's its own strength. Little old Mary ran up, clutching a handful of wildflowers. Papa, for Mama Mary and Emma. She placed them carefully on the graves, as she did every week. Beautiful little one, Ethan said. lifting her up. Sarah and Robert arrived for Sunday dinner, their own son toddling between them. The house filled with voices, laughter, the chaos of family. As the sun set, Ethan stood once more on the porch. But this time Maya stood with him, their children playing at their feet, Sarah's music drifting from inside where she taught Robert a new song. "Any regrets?" Maya asked. Ethan thought of that horrible day in Copper Creek, Morrison shouting, "Buy one, get one free," like human beings were merchandise. He thought of the $1,000 that had seemed like everything then and felt like nothing now compared to what he'd gained. "No," he said, pulling Maya closer. "No regrets. Even though you got more than you bargained for?" She gestured at the controlled chaos of their expanded family. "Especially because of that." Morrison thought he was being clever, bundling people like property. But here's what he never understood. When you open your heart to save one person, you don't just save them, you save yourself. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, you build something that saves everyone involved. Sarah appeared in the doorway, her violin now replacing the simple whistle. "Less philosophy, more music," she declared. "The children want to dance." As they all moved inside, Ethan paused at the threshold, looking back at the graves beneath the cottonwood. The tree had grown taller, its branches spreading wide, sheltering the dead while providing shade for the living who came to remember. "Thank you," he whispered to Mary and Emma, "for teaching me that love doesn't end. It just changes shape." Inside, his living family called for him. Maya's laugh, the children's giggles, Sarah's music, Robert's bad jokes. The cabin that had once been a tomb of silence now overflowed with life. Morrison had offered buy one, get one free, the cruel mathematics of human trafficking. But the real equation had been different. Save 2 lives, gain a family. Face your demons, find redemption. Choose love over vengeance. Discover that the heart's capacity for healing is infinite. The desert wind carried Sarah's music across the valley, a melody of survival and hope, of voices recovered and families reborn. And in that music was the answer to every question Morrison had never thought to ask. What is the true value of a human life? Immeasurable, priceless, sacred, always. 10 years hence. The letter came on a spring morning in 1892, delivered by a young Apache man on horseback. Ethan, now 56 with gray threading through his hair, recognized the tribal markings before the rider spoke. "You are Ghost Walker?" the young man asked in Apache. "I was. Now I'm just Ethan Cross. The tribal council sends this. They said you would understand." The letter was written in English, carefully penned. "To the Ghost Walker who became family, the council has voted. The knowledge Sarah and Maya Cross preserve will be formally taught in our schools. Their work translating and documenting our medicine has saved countless lives in the recent outbreak. Your eldest daughter, Mary Singing Bird Cross, has been accepted as the first mixed-blood student in our healer's tradition. Sarah's son shows promise as a keeper of stories. What Morrison tried to destroy has instead multiplied. What he tried to sell has become priceless gift, freely given. The council also wishes you to know the story of the buy one, get one free insult has spread among all Apache bands. It has become a cautionary tale about the white men who see only property where human beings stand, but also a tale of hope that some whites, like you, see truly. White Eagle would be proud of what his daughters have become and of the man who spent everything to free them. Walk in peace, Ghost Walker. You have earned your rest, the Apache Tribal Council." Ethan found Maya teaching their youngest, David, to track rabbits. At 38, she moved with the same grace that had first caught his attention, though now it was matched with the confidence of a woman who had found her place. "Good news?" she asked, seeing his expression. He handed her the letter. She read it, tears forming, then called out, "Sarah, come see." Sarah, now 34 and mother of 3, emerged from the schoolhouse where she'd been teaching. Her voice, silent for 4 years, now rarely stopped, filling their lives with stories, songs, and endless questions. She read the letter and whooped with joy. Mary's going to be a healer, a real Apache healer. Their daughter, now 14, blushed but stood taller with pride. She had Ethan's steady calm and Maya's fierce spirit, bridging 2 worlds with grace neither had imagined possible. That evening, as three generations gathered for dinner, Ethan raised his glass of water. He'd stopped drinking years ago, no longer needing whiskey to quiet ghosts. To Morrison, he said, surprising everyone, "May he rest in whatever peace he can find. His cruelty brought us together. His buy one, get one free became the foundation of everything we've built." "That's a strange toast, Papa," young David said. "Sometimes, son, the worst things that happen to us become doorways to the best." Morrison meant to destroy. Instead, he created. He looked around the table at his family. Maya, Sarah, their children, Robert, the network of Apache and white families they'd united. He thought he was selling property. Instead, he was delivering me salvation. Sarah raised her own glass. "To the voices we found, the families we chose, and the love that refuses to be priced or packaged. To the ghost walker," Maya added softly, "who learned to walk among the living again." Outside, the desert bloomed with spring flowers, the harsh land made beautiful by rain and time and patient tending. The cottonwood tree spread its branches wide, sheltering both graves and the bench where children played, where past and present met in peaceful coexistence. In the Apache camps, storytellers began to share the tale of the buy one, get one free insult that became a redemption. How a broken white man spent his last dollar on what Morrison called worthless merchandise and gained a fortune beyond measure. How a silent girl found her voice to save them all. How a warrior's daughter brought love back to a heart turned to stone. The story spread, changed, grew with each telling. But at its heart remained a truth that no amount of retelling could alter. That human beings are not property, that love cannot be bought or sold, and that sometimes the greatest gifts come from the greatest insults to human dignity. In his final years, Ethan would often sit beneath the cottonwood tree, Maya beside him, children and grandchildren playing nearby. He would think of that day in Copper Creek, Morrison's sneering voice offering, "Buy one, get one free," like human beings were merchandise. He would remember the weight of that leather pouch, $1,000 that had seemed like everything. And he would smile knowing that Morrison's cruelty had become their salvation. Sarah's music drifted across the valley, now teaching her own daughters the songs their grandmother had sung. Maya's voice harmonized in Apache and English both, and Ethan would close his eyes, feeling Mary and Emma's presence in the rustle of cottonwood leaves. The ghost walker had found his peace, not in isolation as he'd planned, but in the chaos of family, the melody of recovered voices, and the knowledge that love transcends death. Morrison had been wrong about everything. He thought he was selling property. Instead, he had delivered redemption. Buy one, get one free? No. Save two, become whole. That was the true accounting. And in that mathematics of the heart, everyone involved had become wealthy beyond measure. The old cottonwood tree stood witness to it all: death, rebirth, and the simple truth that some debts, once paid, return as blessings.